Hello, my name is Tommy Butts, Extension Weed Scientist with the University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture. And thank you for joining me for this virtual aspect of my presentation for the 2022 University of Tennessee Milan No-Till Field Day. My presentation today here is on herbicide weed resistance, the Arkansas pigweed strikes back. So jumping into my presentation here, I first wanted to hit on just the overall herbicide resistance that's popping up in Palmer amaranth across Arkansas. And currently at the moment, we have resistance confirmed to 7 different sites of action in the state in our pigweed populations. So first of all, these top 3 that I have, the group 9s or glyphosate, group 3s or like prowl and treflan, the yellow herbicides, and the group 2 herbicides, ALS inhibitors, are pretty much 100% of our populations. I just assume that those 3 are not going to work on any single Palmer amaranth population we have in the state. The next listed herbicide you'll see is HPPD inhibitors, or our group 27, our bleachers. And at this time, we're not really considering this resistance to be widespread, but it's definitely increasing in frequency. We're seeing it pop up in more places and cause some more problems for us, especially in our corn acres. Now, finally, the last 3 that I'm really going to emphasize and go into a little more detail on are probably the most troublesome to me in our state, especially for our soybean acres. And that includes resistance to PPO inhibitors, or the group 14 herbicides, our VLCFA inhibitors, or our group 15 herbicides, and then the one that we'll hit on that's a real backbreaker is the group 10s, or Liberty resistance, glufosinate resistance. So starting off, as you can see here with this map, every county shaded in red here in this dark red has a confirmed PPO inhibitor resistant Palmer amaranth population. So at this point, PPO resistance is very widespread in the state. And now this is the post herbicides. We still do get some activity out of pre-residual applications, but there is also resistance to those residuals as well. So we don't get the same level of control anymore. What's also a little bit scarier when we look on this map, all of these stars indicate populations where we have confirmed VLCFA inhibitor or group 15 resistance. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about dual magnum and warrant herbicides, so S-metolachlor and acetochlor. And you can see that that is gradually increasing across our state as well, threatening our different crops, especially our soybean crops, with those herbicides effectively being rendered useless for Palmer amaranth control. This is just to help highlight one of our resistant sites and just the level of control that we're getting with some of these group 15 herbicides when we have this resistance. So if you look down here at this first range, you can see over here, this first plot is our non-treated. And as we move over, this is dual magnum at a pint per acre, at 1.3 pints per acre, and at 2 pints per acre. And you can see at the 1 pint and even pint and a third, we have pretty little control of that Palmer amaranth. Once we start getting into really high rates, we maybe get some control, but it's still not great. On the next 2 plots, you'll actually see outlook. And so you can see that a different group 15 herbicide, we actually can get pretty decent control of this Palmer population, so we don't have full cross resistance yet. So that is slight good news, a little bit of a silver lining. When we come over to these next 2 plots that are pretty nasty, this happens to be warrant or acetochlor at 2 pints per acre and 3 pints per acre, and you can see that's really not controlling this population at all. And then the final 4 plots happen to be zidua at different rates as we increase. And if we get up to the 4 and 5 fluid ounce per acre rate, you can see we actually get pretty good control of this population. So slight good news out of this population is that it's not fully cross-resistant. We can get some control still out of zidua and outlook, but effectively, S-metolachlor, dual magnum, and acetochlor warrant are not doing what they used to do for us and are pretty much rendered useless as far as pigweed control goes at these sites. Now, like we mentioned in that map, these sites are not extremely widespread. We have, I think, close to 10 or so different populations confirmed resistant. But so we still have very effective use of our group 15 herbicides, but definitely a scary proposition as this continues to increase in frequency across the state. Now, the real scary one that we just recently confirmed as of last year is glufosinate resistance or Liberty resistance. We actually have two confirmed populations up in our northeast part of the state in Mississippi and Crittenden counties. And so this is real bad news, losing this herbicide and this mode of action in our different crops. In both soybean and cotton, actually, we pulled these populations from. Now, just to show what this resistance looks like, to help with pictures, this was the dose response screening conducted in the greenhouse. The far left picture, or the far left tray, is 16 fluid ounces per acre of Liberty. This one right here is a quart rate of Liberty. Then we have 128 fluid ounces per acre and 256 fluid ounces per acre on the far right here, which is basically an 8x rate. And you can see at our quart rate, we basically have complete survival. We basically killed none of these pigweeds off. And this is in a greenhouse setting. So we're talking 2-inch pigweed, excellent coverage with an XR flat fan nozzle. I mean, best possible scenario to control these weeds with Liberty herbicide, and you can see how many survivors we have. Even out here at this 256 fluid ounce per acre rate and ADEX rate, we still have survivors all the way out at that rate. So again, very high level resistance, very detrimental that this herbicide is going to be rendered ineffective at this site. And again, just another picture to help reemphasize this. The tray on the left was our susceptible, and you can see we killed every single plant in there at a quart rate at the labeled rate of Liberty, in contrast to our Mississippi County resistant population on the right here, with basically almost every single plant surviving that labeled rate application. So very bad news when it comes to glufosinate resistance. The PPO inhibitor resistance is very widespread at this point, and the group 15 resistance gradually increasing is also very troublesome for our growers to lose those options and just have no really, very minimal options anymore to control this monster of a weed. Now, to help just really emphasize this problem that we face, I have this short little video clip that I'll play, and there's really no other way that I can show just exactly what we're facing better than what this clip does. So this comes from an Arkansas football game a couple years ago, and what we have is basically our pigweed is getting all of these different herbicides thrown at it, and it's just trudging through it, running through all of those things, and making it down to the end zone where it's reproducing, producing seed, giving us problems in future years. So this is just what we're battling on a daily basis anymore on the Arkansas side of the river when it comes to pigweed. And I'm actually missing a couple of defenders there that should be hitting that pigweed too. It really gets through 7. It only got through 5 here. So this is even lacking for an example at this point. But it's the best example I can give on what this pigweed's doing. So I don't want to spend, all my time on the negative and what we're facing there and everything else. I mean, it's just bad news all around. And I really should emphasize too, with that glufosinate resistant pigweed, that is the first resistant broadleaf in the world to Liberty or to glufosinate herbicide. So we have confirmed the first broadleaf weed in the world to that herbicide resistant in the state of Arkansas. And that's not something to be proud of. That's not something we really wanted to be #1 in, but that's something to note that there are no other weeds in the world that have been confirmed resistant to glufosinate, or to broadleaf weeds, I should say, a broadleaf weed confirmed resistant to glufosinate in the world. And so that's a very problematic thing. That's a really, hard hit to our growers. And so we really need to find some alternative methods of control, right? And that's where I want to keep a little optimism and kind of jump into what we're recommending to our growers so that they can get these populations still under control, still have a successful crop. Now, the best way to do that is to, utilize multiple diverse integrated weed management strategies. And this is not an easy button. This is not an easy thing to do, but this is what we have to do when we have this much resistance built up. And again, when we have the only confirmed broadleaf weed resistant to glufosinate in the world, we have to start mixing up other alternative strategies other than just herbicides. So you can see I got a few things listed there. I'm also going to go into a little more detail on some of these in the next few slides. So the first thing I wanted to hit on is just some research showing the power of multiple effective mode of actions, and especially in our residual programs, and how they can help improve our pigweed control. So this data comes from the Marion site. Well, actually, it comes from multiple sites, but it includes PPO inhibitor resistant pigweed as well as Group 15 or the VLCFA resistant pigweed populations. And you can see all of these herbicides we have listed have multiple different modes of action in them. So we have, group 2s or the ALSs, which really aren't providing a lot when it comes to pigweed control. But we work in the group 5, so metribuzin. We're still utilizing some group 14s or the PPO inhibitors because we still do get some residual activity out of it, even though we have resistance. But then we're still implementing in our group 15s as well, especially Zidua, because like I showed previously in that slide, Zidua is still working for us even though we lost, we may have lost dual magnum and acetochlor, the warrant. The Zidua is still working. So if we can get metribuzin out, if we can get Zidua out, and if we can still use our PPO inhibitors out there a little bit like Valor, that's going to get us very tight weed control windows. You can see here we're averaging, anywhere from 80 to 100% control. So it's a very tight, consistent level of control. And all our averages over here are 85% plus. So if we get multiple effective mode of actions out there in our residuals, we can be very successful at managing these resistant populations. It's always easier to control them before they ever get up. And really in the long term, I always get told a lot of the time, residuals can be so expensive. But if you look at the whole season long use, our weed control programs that utilize strong, effective, multiple mode of action residuals always end up being cheaper programs at the end of the year because we're not relying on multiple post applications that are more inconsistent and end up increasing our application costs as well. So utilizing these multiple mode of action residuals gets us better and more consistent control, and also really ends up being a little easier on the pocketbook at the end of the year. Now, I also want to highlight another recommendation we're giving to our growers is to overlap residuals. This is crucial to us getting season-long weed control, especially in areas where we have wider row spacings, such as in these pictures here. You can see we were growing on 38-inch rows. And if you just look at these plots from afar, you might not think that either one is too bad. You might think they're pretty similar in control. But if we zoom in, the photo on the left is where we had an overlapping residual. So we actually overlapped dual magnum in this case because we were still getting control with that because it is still effective in most places in our state. And so you can see on the left, we have no weeds coming up. It's bare ground there. We have not had any more emergence. Whereas the picture on the right, where we just had a post application, we didn't overlap residuals, you can see how many seedlings have popped through there, both grass and pigweed seedlings coming that we're still battling. And we still have, at least a couple weeks before we could get to complete canopy closure. So those weeds are going to get to pretty good size and blow through the top of that canopy later in the season. So overlapping residuals is critical for us to still utilize some different site of actions, not put all the pressure on our post-emergence herbicides for controlling our weeds and having to have extra application costs as well. So that's another recommendation we've been really stressing in Arkansas to get these pigweed populations under control. The next thing I wanted to hit on is just application practices. And we harp on these a lot, but I like to show these pictures because I actually have some pictures to emphasize why these are important. So in these two pictures, this is a study where we sprayed Liberty herbicide, so a contact herbicide, with 2 spray volumes, 5 gallons per acre and 20 gallons per acre. And you can see that the 20 gallon per acre treatment got us a significantly better level of control compared to our 5 gallon per acre treatment. Now the 20 is not excellent by any means. We still have a lot of regrowth and everything else, but this was using an inappropriate droplet size. It was too big, which I'm going to get on in a little bit here. But you can see if we can increase that spray volume and get better coverage, we'll have a lot better weed control at the end of the day. Now, a lot of people think that's just for contact herbicides. Well, we can also see that same level of increase in control with a systemic herbicide such as dicamba. So here we have, again, a very large droplet size, but at 5 gallons per acre, we got very minimal control. At 20 gallons per acre, again, not excellent control by any means, but much better control than at 5 GPA. So increasing our GPA can help us get better weed control, right? More volume, more coverage, it gets us a better level of control. But that's not the only part of the story we need to talk about. We also need to focus on the droplet size part of this story. And so with Liberty herbicide, here's different droplet sizes that we use. So anywhere from 150 microns, which is a fine, all the way up to 900 microns here, which is a very ultra coarse spray. And you can see varying levels of control, but we actually achieved really quite good control at this 300 micron or this medium spray in this picture here. And I'd like to note that this treatment was sprayed at 5 gallons per acre. And we don't recommend 5 gallons per acre with Liberty, but if you have the correct droplet size, if you get that smaller droplet size, you can make up quite a bit for low spray volume and still achieve a significant level of control. But now if you think about pairing this 300 micron droplet with a larger volume like 15, 20 GPA, you can see how we can exponentially increase our levels of control there and achieve very high levels of control compared to just trying to rely on one or the other. Now, when we also look at dicamba, we also see a droplet size effect. Really from about 300 to 750 microns, we see about the same level of control. So obviously we're going to recommend this larger, extremely coarse spray because you can achieve the same level of control while also reducing off-target movement concerns, right? Some physical drift concerns. But I would like to note here that at this 5 GPA, this 900 micron droplet treatment or ultra coarse spray was statistically similar to our non-treated control here. Basically what I'm saying there is we could have sprayed absolutely nothing and done just as well as dicamba with a 900 micron droplet at 5 GPA. And that's huge that we are losing that much control even with a systemic herbicide when we get a droplet size that big. And this is in the realm of our possibilities with those TTI nozzles that get promoted so much for the drift reduction capabilities in the dicamba system. So I stress this to say in a situation like our dicamba systems where we are forced to this very large droplet size to reduce off-target movement, we need to increase our volume, right? We have to, otherwise we cannot get enough coverage, we cannot get enough control. So in situations like the Liberty where we have a little more freedom over our droplet size, if we can bring that droplet size down some and get better coverage that way, that to me is always the better way to get better controls, to change our nozzle and change our droplet size. But if we get forced into large droplet sizes for drift reduction, that's when we have to increase that spray volume. And again, too, with the Liberty, if we can do both, drop our droplet size a little bit to get better coverage, but also increase our volume, man, we're getting the best of both worlds and we'll just be exponentially increasing that level of weed control. Now, some other things that we need to do as well is just implement other strategies outside of herbicides. We just need to get away from chemicals only. And to help emphasize that, I got another football clip. This actually comes from my home state, Wisconsin Badgers, that I needed to mention. But so these are some things that we don't want to do, right? So just to help emphasize this, we don't want to be only using one mode of action because we will miss our successful weed control and throw right into selection pressure. We don't want to use only herbicides because when we do that, we'll overshoot successful weed control and develop herbicide resistance. We'll throw a pick. And finally, we just need to quit repeating failed strategies because when we keep throwing it in the red zone, our weeds adapt, we miss successful weed control, and those weeds just take it back on us all the way back to the 50-yard line, right? So again, we need to use more than one mode of action so we can get successful weed control. We have to use something other than herbicides. So that's what I'm going to talk about next here is some other strategies, and we have to quit repeating failed strategies. We got to mix it up, right? Don't keep throwing it in the red zone when you keep throwing interceptions, okay? We got to mix it up. So with that, just some other strategies I wanted to hit on real briefly. If we can increase canopy development, that helps us with our weed control strategy. So, narrow row widths, earlier planting dates, early season weed control with residuals, all of that can be beneficial at enhancing our canopy development and shading out those weed species. Using cover crops to help cover that soil and just not allow pigweeds to be in as favorable environment to germinate, that can help out a lot. Cleaning equipment to make sure that we don't spread weed seeds from one field to the next. If we know we have a problem field, keep the problem in that field and save the rest of the farm. It's a lot easier to manage a 200-acre field than it is a 2,000-acre farm for a problem weed, right? So clean and sanitize equipment can be real beneficial. And then we're doing research on this, but potentially looking into harvest weed seed control methods. So seed destruction, narrow windrow burning, those types of things, not letting seed return to the seed bank and plaguing us for future years. Just to help summarize kind of all of those main takeaways, we've started this sports weed control extension campaign. So it's just an acronym to help you remember these different recommendations. So if you can remember sports, it'll help you remember these management tactics. So, the S is for start clean, P is for pre-emergence herbicides, O is for overlapping those residuals. R is using required IWM tactics like we already talked about, seed prevention, cover crops, crop rotations, one we didn't even mention, things like that. T is for timely. We need to hit weeds when they're small and you get our residuals overlapped when they're not emerged yet. And then the final S is selection of multiple effective site of action herbicides. So use this sports method and it'll help out your weed control drastically, even where we have these multiple resistant weeds out there on us. This strategy will be very successful for us no matter what field you're in. Finally, I just wanted to hit on some other information from us. If you ever need to, get some different pieces of fact sheets or other information, please look us up over here on the Arkansas Extension side as well. We've got multiple fact sheets in our MP44 as well as our website. I also wanted to highlight a few other things. We do have our own YouTube channel. If you scan the QR code, you can see some different symptomology videos we've put together. If you want to be on our text service, you can text weeds to 501-300-8883, and we send out roughly 6 text messages a month just highlighting, hey, we're seeing this in the field, we've got a new podcast available, etc., just to give you updates right in your inbox on your phone for different extension weeds related materials. And then finally, if you haven't checked out our Weeds Are Wild podcast series, we have a weekly podcast that we do on Arkansas Row Crops Radio. Check that out. We try and give timely information each week on what we're seeing and our recommendations to get those weeds in hand in a lot of our field crop situations. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you to the different funding sources that fund my program, as well as my weed science crew. Without them getting all of this hard work done in the background, I'd be lost and unable to do all these extension events and provide this research supported information as these recommendations. And then finally, just wanted to say thank you for joining in for this segment of the Milan Field Day. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and get a hold of me. My contact info is here on the screen, my email, Twitter account, as well as my phone number. So thank you very much. And like I said, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to get a hold of me.